everyone, welcome to the Mally Way. I'm Mally, and this is chapter 5 of my stamp school series. And today we will be looking at stamp handles. Now, modern wax stamps used to mainly come with basic wooden handles, but these days there are so many designs that you can choose from, and with stamp heads being interchangeable, crafters can mix and match whatever handles they fancy. And in this chapter, I am going to talk about whether handle designs make a difference in the stamping process. In a word, yes. In a few more words, it does make a difference, but the impact is almost inconsequential when you take into account the grand scheme of things. But because I want to be thorough in my series, this chapter will be at least 10 minutes long. These are some stamp handles in my collection. I've got more, but I think this brings the point across. And I will be using them for my explanation. Now, just a disclaimer, I am not an engineer. I did look into what certain parts are called, but I won't be able to explain things as eloquently as an expert would. I can technically summarize this chapter in a few sentences, but I do enjoy nerding out about the mechanics of these things, so I'm going to do a full explanation. Now, my voice is sounding a little weird. I am still sick. I'm not filming these chapters in sequence, so in some chapters I'm going to have a higher pitched voice, and in others I sound like I smoked a whole pack of cigarettes. Okay, it's very straightforward regardless of handle design. You just screw in your stamp head, align your design, and stamp. Some crafters, they mark their stamp heads using a marker right about here where the center of the design is, to indicate how it should be placed so they can align their stamp heads relatively quickly when they craft. I personally don't do it. I don't want to mark up my stamps. That is just a personal preference, but that is a little quick trick for you to do if you want to do it more quickly and easily. You'll use the stamps the same way across handle designs, but I've noticed that when it comes to stamp handles that are asymmetrical, in the sense that it's not rounded. I know this design is symmetrical. It's not rounded. It can get slightly trickier, and let me show you what I mean. When you screw a stamp head into a handle that is symmetrical, the way you hold the handle doesn't change regardless of how you turn your stamp. But when it comes to handles that are not rounded like that, depending on how the bolt at the end was screwed in, the anterior part or the front of your handle may not align with the proper orientation of your stamp head. So you will have to keep that in mind when you make your stamp. It wouldn't matter if you are creating plain wax seals on a coaster, since you'll be peeling them off the coasters for other use. But when you're stamping directly onto your letters, envelopes, and whatnot, you don't necessarily want it to be off-centered or misaligned. You want For example, you want the tulips to be oriented like that. You want the words with love to look like that and not to the side or upside down. There are two things that affect how stamp heads align with stamp handles: the alignment of the bolt in the handle and the orientation of the stamp head design. Now, the mechanics that allow stamp heads and handles to come together works just like a nut and bolt. So in this case, a stamp head would act as the nut and the handle would be the bolt. The exterior threads, that's the spiral ridge you see here, the external threads on the handle would need to align with the internal threads in the stamp head for them to fasten together, for them to fasten with each other, forming the wax stamp. I assume most of us are familiar with the mechanics of the screw, if not wax stamps, then in our daily lives with bottles, jars, even pens. So I've got a water bottle here, and I'm going to explain it with a bottle so it's easier for you to see because the parts on the stamps are smaller. So this is the external thread, the spiral ridges, and this is the internal thread. Now I'm gonna call this part at the end the thread end because this is a thread and that's the end. I don't know if that is the proper term. This over here is another thread end. Now, in order for two things to screw together, the ends will need to align. Of course, we don't look for it, we just turn and it will naturally fit together. They will find each other and come together to form a whole piece. Now, the placement of the thread ends normally isn't a big deal because most items in our daily lives that has this screw mechanism, one of their parts is usually symmetrical or rounded. For example, regular pens, it's rounded all the way. The way you hold your pen won't get affected no matter how or where the thread ends align, as long as they do, because it all feels the same no matter where you turn. Same with typical water bottles and jars, etc. But when it comes to wax stamps, what happens is the designs are carved into stamps without regard to where the internal thread ends, and the bolts are screwed into handles without regard to where the external thread ends. Now, this is totally fair. I think it's a tall order to expect anyone to align everything perfectly, especially considering the marginal consequences of parts misaligning. As long as they come together, they work, you're good. All you need to do when they don't align is literally to turn your stamp and potentially feel a bit uncomfortable when you hold your stamp for the few seconds you place it down into the wax. Now, what am I talking about? Let me show you an example. With round stamp heads and rounded handles, you don't experience it. It doesn't even have to be this typical basic wooden handle. It can be something more extravagant looking, more polished, like this. it's rounded all the way. It's just a little more fancy. Or this. Or even something like this. With these types of handles, you don't really experience it, because no matter how you hold the stamp handle, it feels natural all around. And all you need to take note of while you stamp is the direction of the design. You turn it so that your design is in the right orientation, and then stamp. But with asymmetrical handles or non-rounded handles, things can get a little bit tricky. It's not that big of a deal. It's more of a minor inconvenience. If a round stamp head is on a handle with a specific design direction. Now this is a shell. Usually you would think that a shell looks like that, maybe like that. You don't expect it to be oriented like that. For me, naturally, it feels like it's supposed to look like that. I actually haven't checked out how the stamp design aligns with the stamp head design, so we're gonna look at it together. Now notice that the interior, that's the front, the interior of the stamp handle doesn't match. Now, I am confident they don't match. I haven't seen it. It doesn't match. Yep. The interior of the stamp head. This should be the front of the stamp head design. And when you stamp, this is how you want your design to appear on your work. So you will need to hold it like that. Oh, this does not feel natural. This feels natural. This doesn't. And also, it's easy to forget how the stamp handle is supposed to turn when you're stamping, because remember how designs are carved into stamp heads without regard to orientation? Now with this stamp head, I had to hold the handle like that. Let's try it with a different stamp head. This time, in a rare case, they sort of align. So I would like to align it like that, because this is the center. I turn it around. It aligns a little bit, but it's sort of tilted. It's sort of tilted. Just a little bit. And I guarantee if I were to stamp multiple cards with this at the start, all of the designs, because it's only slightly tilted, they are all gonna look like that instead of this. Because naturally, I would hold the stamp. Maybe I would remember to tilt it a little bit and stamp it, but most likely I won't turn it enough. Again, it's not a big deal. This chapter is more like sharing an observation I've made. But, you know, when stamps are placed face down like that, you reach over, you grab it to make your seal. Your instinct is to align the handle for the orientation of the seal. You don't necessarily remember, or you don't necessarily realize that they don't align. And the way I found out about this was with a stamp handle with this design. Now this is not rounded. It is sort of at the bottom, but not at the top. And what happened was I screwed in a square stamp head into this handle, look at how misaligned they are. If you put the handle flat, or if you try to anyway, the stamp head isn't. And if you put the stamp head down parallel to the table, the handle is not parallel to the table. With this handle, I would hold it like that, maybe like that, maybe like that. It doesn't affect things too much. So that was how I realized, oh, I thought every handle and every stamp head aligned perfectly with each other because they always did. But when it came to this type of handle that's not rounded, oh, and I had to put it in a nice box with the mold specifically made for a stamp like that. It was made for a round stamp head, not a square one. And when I put it in to the box, I realized, oh no, it's not going to fit because this is how the stamp head fits into the box. It's gonna break it because it's sharp. So that's how I realized handles and stamp heads do not necessarily align with each other. And this can be even more irritating if you've got a handle like that. This has a clear design direction. And when you stamp, your instinct would be to hold it like that. Because this is the head, this is the feet, top, bottom, anterior, posterior. This is how you want to use it. But after you screw in your stamp head, oh wow, they are so misaligned. You gotta hold your handle like this. This is not natural. This doesn't feel natural at all. Again, not a big deal, just a minor inconvenience. But oh my. And okay, I say it's not a big deal because usually you're working with a stamp design that is not too extra, even if it's not rounded. Maybe it's squarish, maybe it's flat. So turning it doesn't make too much of a difference. You can still align your you can still align the design on your stamp head properly if you take care. But when it gets too uncomfortable to hold a handle, or if you can't find a natural grip, it will affect how your seal turn out. Because, oh wow, I totally forgot about it until I started prepping the handles. Sometimes you're unlucky and you end up receiving stamp heads that you ordered where the screws, the bolts, were not screwed in straight. Now, usually sellers would be kind enough to send a replacement because this counts as a defect. But other times they might just offer like a partial refund, or you just don't want to deal with the hassle, you just want to work with what you got. You thought misaligned designs was bad. This is not level. This is not level. And when you hold the handle, you hold it naturally as you do. But when you stamp, that means the stamp head is tilted. Right? You see how they are not level with each other? And when I stamp, this happens. I can turn the stamp to find like a better way to land my stamp, but there's always that gallop thingy. You have to be mindful when your handles are atypical. This is another one. Look at how it's not centered for one, and it's tilted. Let me just put in a stamp head to show you. This seems to work at this angle, but I'm not going to remember it. Plus, every stamp head, they're going to orientate differently. So that's something you need to be mindful of when you're working with handles that are not perfect, rounded, or when their bolts are misaligned, causing the stamp to be tilted. Now, going back to non-rounded handles, it's not too big of a deal if your stamp head comes in an obvious shape that indicates how the design is aligned. Because you can tell from looking at the side. You don't have to flip it, turn it, come back, and hopefully you aligned it properly. You can see it from the shape of the stamp head. But with stamp heads that are round or quadrilateral shaped stamp heads, or what else do I have? Well, this is blank, so it doesn't really doesn't make the argument that I thought I was gonna make. But I mean, you can choose to have these engraved. I chose to get them blank. Yeah, so when it comes to those designs, you will have to be mindful. There is an extra awareness that you will need to have when you stamp your designs. It's easier with a square, I think. The challenge comes in when you're working with, when you're working with a round stamp head. Because, yeah, you gotta get a good grip. This handle is not making the point that I thought it would make. Because with round stamp heads and handles that are not rounded, oh wow, okay. So this is how it's gonna go down. You need that extra awareness. I'll have to hold it like that. With this design, I'll probably have to hold it a different way with a different design. So in conclusion, stamp handle designs do make a difference to your wax stamping process, in the sense that you gotta double check if your stamp head is aligned with your handle, if your stamps are not marked. Remember when I said some people mark the center of their stamp head so it's easier for them to see and align, so they don't have to flip it around. And that is a helpful tip. It really is. Because when you're working with wax, it sometimes sets pretty quickly, and any time you're wasting aligning the stamp is precious time you're losing while the wax is already hardening up, setting, and your seal may not turn out as nicely as you want. And also potentially having it not aligned properly anyway, that's annoying. So mark your stamp hits. I'm still not going to. I don't like it. I don't want to have markings on my stamp head, so I will have to live with the choices that I make, but marking it will make things easier. And also, stamp handle designs do make a difference to your process in the sense that you may need to hold the handle in a way that feels unnatural. This does not feel natural. But hey, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't make too big of an impact. It's just a little bit annoying. It's a minor inconvenience. So yes, it does affect things, but in a really trivial way. And go ahead and go crazy getting all sorts of handles to add to your collection, because just be happy and be mindful when you make your seals. Once you get the hang of it, you remember, oh, this is another one that's tilted. It's so tilted, you see? The bolt. I used this handle in a video and I tried hard. I did my best to hide this misalignment, I think. But you can still see it. It's pretty obvious. Look at it. It's fine. They work. They still work. So that is it for today's chapter on stamp handles. I hope this has been helpful to you, and if you have any questions, feel free to comment down below and I will do my best to answer them. If you're enjoying the Stamp School series, do give my videos a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel to stay updated. Your support really helps and mean a lot to me. Ring that notification bell to be alerted about new uploads, and I wish you a wonderful day or night whenever it is you're watching this video. Thank you for watching and happy stamping!